Somebody asked you, at your service retirement debrief last week, what kind of acknowledgement you wanted on the way out. And you said nothing. And you were not being humble, you meant it. That word came out of your mouth faster than you could blink. No pause, no thinking, just nothing. Like somebody had offered you a second helping of something you had not enjoyed the first time around. This is the psychology of intelligence officers, whose greatest operational achievements will never be publicly recognized. The medal awarded in a closed room, the breakthrough credited, if at all, to the appropriate office. The career that produced collection of national security significance and ended, on paper, with a one-line service certificate. And the wild thing is, you mean every word of nothing. You genuinely do not want anything. The question is where that came from, because nobody enters this trade that way. Picture this. It is September 1945. Virginia Hall, who has just spent the previous 2 years operating inside Nazi-occupied France for the American Office of Strategic Services and the British Special Operations Executive, including running intelligence and resistance networks that the Gestapo had been hunting under the name Die Hinkende Frau, the limping woman, is being offered the Distinguished Service Cross. William Donovan, the director of OSS, wants to award it to her publicly. President Truman has indicated he is willing to present it personally. Hall declines. Her reasoning, according to the later declassified ceremony memo and the subsequent CIA Office of Public Affairs case profile, is that public recognition would compromise future operational utility. The Distinguished Service Cross is the second highest American military decoration. Virginia Hall received hers in a private ceremony with Donovan, her mother, and one OSS deputy present. No press, no photograph in any newspaper. The American public would not hear her name in any sustained way for nearly 6 more decades. That is the foundational moment of this particular cognitive pattern, and it has been repeating in some form ever since. Hold on to the word normal, the way that ceremony went, because it is going to matter very soon.
But the private ceremony was only half of it. The other half, the operational achievement itself, that is where something started to shift inside the cohort of officers who came after Hall. Every operational generation in the intelligence services has had the officers whose work everyone inside the agency knew was historic. The first wave of Cold War atomic intelligence officers. Robert Lamphere, who is the FBI's principal Venona case officer during the late 1940s and early 1950s, identified some of the most consequential Soviet penetrations of the Manhattan Project, but who could not, by the secrecy classification of the Venona program itself, be publicly associated with that work until decades after his retirement. He would not see the program declassified until 1995, more than 30 years after he left the Bureau. By then, the cultural moment that might have credited his career to him had long since passed. The recognition arrived. It arrived empty. You read that pattern in case officers' biographies, and you start to understand something. The maybe for the next administration promise was your service's version of the maybe for Christmas deflection. Everyone in the trade knew what it meant. It was code for no. So what did you do? Some of you let yourself be disappointed. Most of you did something else, something small that looks like nothing but actually rewired your operational psychology. You adjusted. You said, okay. You went back to the work, and by the next morning you were not thinking about it anymore. You adjusted fast, almost suspiciously fast. And that speed was not random. The service you were operating inside was practically training you to do exactly that. Between approximately 1947 and 1975, the share of CIA operational decorations approved by the Office of the Director and immediately classified as restricted access, meaning the recipient could not display the award, discuss it outside the agency, or have it referenced in any unclassified personnel record, rose from approximately 20% of approved awards to over 70%. That is internal personnel data partially documented in the CIA's Center for the Study of Intelligence retrospective publications. In just under 30 years, the operational award system inside the agency went from being a partially public recognition mechanism to a near fully private one. And layered right on top of that, the operational tempo of the Cold War was rising at a pace that meant any given officer was likely to do their most significant work in their 30s and 40s, exactly when recognition would have meant the most professionally. So what does any of this have to do with what you wanted at your retirement debrief? Everything. Because in an agency where recognition is structurally privatized at exactly the moment your operational contribution is highest, the recognition itself slides down the priority list, not because you do not care about being seen, but because the channel for being seen was never really built. Some of you had a service where recognition simply fell through the cracks, not every operation, but enough. And some of you had the half recognition, the closed-room award ceremony, the chief calling you in to acknowledge what could not be referenced anywhere else. And what happened next is where the psychology gets really interesting, because you did not process any of this. You did not sit down and think about it. You did not journal about it. You were 32. Your brain just filed it quietly, and the note it filed said, "Recognition, not a structural part of this trade. Lower the expectations, keep moving." There is a term for this in cognitive psychology, disappointment inoculation, and it works like a vaccine for your operational expectations. When you get small, repeated non-recognitions for the same kind of work, not big dramatic ones, just a long series of quiet ones, your brain stops getting excited about that recognition. It is not sadness, it is efficiency. Your brain quietly reached over and turned down the volume on operational recognition expectation, and it never turned it back up. But the privatized award system was not doing this by itself. It had backup. The entire culture of the trade around you was teaching the same lesson from every angle. The message, and if you came up in it, you know exactly what I'm talking about, was this: do not be full of yourself. Do not show off the operation. Do not draw the trade's institutional attention to your specific work. Be quiet. Handle it. Figure it out. Your seniors did not sit you down and say, "Never expect to be celebrated."
They did not have to. The way the trade worked around you set it for them. You closed a major collection penetration? Good. Now route the case file to the relevant division and stop talking about it. You ran an asset that changed an administration's policy posture? Good. Make sure the protocol leaves no trace of the chain of contribution. You broke a long-running counterintelligence puzzle? Good. Write the closeout memo, hand it to the analytical office, and let them be the ones publicly credited if anyone is ever credited at all. Not every senior officer, not every operation, but the pattern was thick enough that it soaked in. A clinical psychologist named Dana Jack published a book in 1991 through Harvard University Press about something she called self-silencing. The idea is straightforward. When the structural environment around you does not respond much to your needs, your brain learns to stop putting those needs out there. Not because you are angry, not because you have given up, because your brain has decided it is faster and more efficient to just stop wanting. And your service retirement debrief is the closest thing to a structural test of this pattern that the trade provides, because retirement is one of the few moments where the institution is, in theory, supposed to recognize you fully. Everyone looks at you. Everyone asks you what you want. And if you spent your whole career being trained by the case files, by the operational protocol, by repetition to not make the work about you, that day stops being a recognition. It becomes the most awkward day in your service file. You do not skip the recognition because you hate it. You skip it because being the operational center of attention for a whole ceremony feels like putting on a uniform that no longer fits. Not painful, just off, like something is wrong but you cannot name it. And that makes sense when you think about it. Being comfortable with public credit is a skill. It is something officers practice. You get it from people seeing you, naming you, citing your work, and your operational generation got very little of that practice, so the muscle never built up. which is why you can speak at a junior officer's swearing in with full enthusiasm. The recognition is on them, and genuinely enjoy every second. But if somebody tries to direct that same energy at your career, the whole institutional system in you tenses up.
So all of this was running by the time you hit mid-career. But then something else got added to the stack, something that made it even easier to wave off recognition forever. In your first decade in the trade, the lack of credit was an excuse to focus on the work. It did not mean much. It was just a fact. In your second decade, it was fine. A closed-room acknowledgement, an internal commendation, whatever. But somewhere in your third decade, the lack of recognition started to feel different. Not because of the work specifically, because of what the work had cost. A 2019 survey of retired senior intelligence officers across multiple Western services, published in an unclassified appendix to a Royal United Services Institute briefing, found that a significant portion of officers in their late 50s and early 60s report that the absence of public recognition for their most significant operational contributions registers, in retirement, as a specific kind of identity weight. Not regret, not bitterness, something quieter. The sense that the most consequential work of one's life has been received structurally as if it had not happened. And for officers like you, sitting now between your mid-50s and late 60s, there is a weight that comes with the ceremony you did not attend. Your earlier mentors are aging. Your career is sending you the operational reminders that it is no longer in its peak window. The cohort you trained alongside is beginning to retire, and the case files you all worked on are being archived, sealed, in some cases reclassified for additional decades. Every quiet milestone becomes a kind of internal accounting. Not, what did I do, but how much of what I did will anyone outside the building ever know? And if you already had a reason to shrug off public recognition, all that training, all that wiring from early service years, this gives you a second, much more convenient reason. Now it is not just that you do not care, it is that caring means counting, and counting means looking at a ledger you would rather leave closed.
But the quietly interesting part, and I mean genuinely interesting, is what you do with everyone else's recognition. You have a memory for it that the Human Resources Directorate would envy. You know your junior officer's promotion ceremony is March 12th. You know your former case partner, who you have not spoken with in 5 years, received a service commendation in November. You will write the note. You will send the message. You will do the institutional thing. Because doing things for other operatives is comfortable. That is the role you have been in since training. Recognizing others, that is your default setting. Being recognized, that is the setting you never installed. And this is where we get to the part that is a little subtle. Because what you say about your own recognition and what is actually going on inside might not be the same thing. When you tell the chief, I do not want anything for the retirement, you believe it 100%. It is not a lie, but it might be something more interesting than the truth. It might be a line you've been rehearsing for 30 years. Think about how many times you have said some version of, I do not need anything. Hundreds. Thousands. You have said it at so many internal recognitions, so many closed-room ceremonies, so many what would you like conversations from the chief that it stopped being a choice. It became a script. And the thing about a script is, once it is memorized, you stop thinking about whether it is true. Someone hits play and the line comes out. There is a difference between not wanting recognition and not remembering how to want it. And that difference, it is paper thin. So thin you cannot see it from the inside. You can only see it from a distance. Because from a distance, I can see that 26-year-old trainee at the OSS lecture hall in 1944, listening to a senior officer describe what the work could become. That trainee did want things. That trainee circled the operational case studies with such intensity that the ink almost went through the page. That trainee had a list. That trainee cared a lot. That trainee just got taught, slowly, gently. Nobody was being unkind about it, but consistently. that wanting recognition for the work leads to the same place most of the time. Maybe in the next administration, maybe when it is declassified, we will see. And "we will see" was the gentlest no in the operational vocabulary. So the recognition-wanting muscle got weaker, not because anything was wrong with it, because you stopped using it on yourself specifically. You can want recognition for your junior officers until you are blue in the face. You can want better case officer training, better tradecraft instruction, better institutional support for the next operational generation. But wanting recognition for your own work on the one day that is supposed to be about you, that wire got disconnected somewhere between the first classified ceremony and the moment somebody told you that what you did would not be eligible for any public credit for at least another 60 years. I am not about to stand here and tell you to demand a parade. Nobody who came up in this trade is going to. But here is what is worth holding. That reflex, the "I do not want anything" reflex, was a smart move. When you were 26, in a service environment where the recognition channel did not really exist for the kind of work you were doing, lowering your expectations was the operationally correct choice. It kept you from getting knocked down by structural disappointment every other case. Your brain did exactly what it was supposed to do. The only issue is your brain never got the update. You're not 26 anymore. You're not waiting for the structural environment to evolve. The work you did exists. It's in the files, in the case officers you trained, in the institutional habits you built into the cohort below you. The situation that created the reflex ended a long time ago, but the reflex is still running, like a program nobody ever closed, just sitting in the background, taking up space.
There are operatives currently working at every Western service who will retire in the next 10 years, having done collection work of historical significance. Several of them are sitting in their offices right now writing their closeout memos and quietly deciding what to say at the debrief. Most of them will say nothing. Most of them will mean it. And then somebody, maybe a younger officer, maybe nobody, maybe the file itself when it is finally opened in the year 2080, will be the one who notices what was actually done. And on that day, in some closed room in a building that does not appear on any organizational chart, the slow public archive will quietly fill in another line that was always supposed to have been there. You do not need the line filled in to know what you did. You never have. The work is already in the architecture of what came after it, and maybe that is enough. But the next time someone asks you what you want, just catch the nothing for 1 second before it leaves your mouth, and in that second, check if there is something underneath it, something that has been sitting there a long time, covered in dust, right next to a private ceremony memo and an unmarked plaque.